the show live on YouTube as well. So you can also post the comments underneath that live stream. Just search for Smooth 981, my analyst this morning. Good morning, Mr. C, and good morning, Chibuzor.
Good morning, Lagos. Good morning, Zibby. Good morning, Mr. C.
Good morning, Zibby. Good morning, Chibuzor. Good morning, Lagos. It's
all right.
Election week.
Election week. Just a few days to go. You guys look so happy, though.
I guess Mr. C has extra cash in his pocket.
He certainly looks like he does.
Funny enough, I don't, but hey, it's what it is.
All right. What a coincidence. Our first story coming from Punch has to do with the Naira crisis. Now, amid the worsening Naira crisis, the total amount of currency in circulation in the Nigerian economy has dropped from 3.3 trillion Naira to 1.54 trillion Naira. And this is according to a CBN document, which was obtained by the paper. All right. What a coincidence. Okay, I hear myself somewhere, but it's all good. So, Mr. C, what do you think about this?
Okay, thank you, Zibby. So, let's start from the beginning for the benefit of listeners who are still not fully seized on the facts. As at October last year, we had about 3.2 trillion Naira, which was currency in circulation. Now, of that, 2.7 trillion was outside the banking system, which means that only about 500 billion was within the banking system. Then we had this new Naira redesign policy formally announced, and within a month of the full deadline coming to stream, we then discovered that about 2.1 trillion had re-entered the system. Now, this report now indicates that the total currency in circulation is about 1.54 trillion, which represents a 53% reduction. Now, this is largely attributable to the fact that the old 500 Naira, 1,000 Naira banknotes are seemingly no longer legal tender. And I use the word seemingly because there's still some controversy, uncertainty as to whether the initial ex parte order of the Supreme Court was renewed for a further 7 days. Now, when the ex parte order was initially made, it was meant to lapse after 7 days. Now, on the return date, the reports of that hearing are not clear. Some reports suggest that the order was extended. Some other reports do not carry that fact. Now, where we are is a number of states, at the last count, I think 10 states had sued the federal government. 2 had joined the federal government in support of this policy, and those states are Edo and Akwa Ibom, if I'm correct. Now, this is coming amidst a biting hardship. So we've had a weakening Naira, we've had inflation, headlined by food inflation, we've had rising debt obligations, and the CBN has consistently maintained that its monetary policies have had little or no impact because the money outside circulation was greater than money within circulation. Now, they believe that with this new moves that their monetary policies will start to have a bigger and greater impact. And we've started to notice in some places that the prices of certain foodstuffs have started to come down because they're at the risk of perishing with no buyers. Now, long term, what does this entail? The president has asked for further patience from Nigerians as they take steps to resolve the situation. But the truth be told, this is really embarrassing. This is really painful, but it's something that we have to do. And I've also started to notice that some of the local sellers now have point of sale machines. So people are starting to adapt. And if Nigerian businesses, small scale, mid scale, are going to evolve and grow into the next century, they're going to have to adapt to changing trends. And one of these trends is we need to move away completely from cash. Yes, I concede that no economy is completely cash free, but we need to evolve. We need to move to digital transactions, because when we move to digital transactions, the economy will grow and everyone will be the better for it. And we only need to look at Ghana. Now, Ghana have had problems managing their debt, and they're taking on debt that is greater than their GDP. But with regards to the Ghanaian and Kenyan examples, where almost every citizen has a mobile phone wallet. So it obviates the need for carrying huge sums of cash, and it helps them handle the cash and reduce the cash handling costs. So imagine in Nigeria where almost everyone had a mobile phone wallet and it's tied to your number. And when you go anywhere, all you have to do is collect the number of the person you want to transfer the money to. You take his number, you enter a few digits, and boom, transfer effected.
Isn't this what the e-Naira is supposed to serve?
I'm going to be very honest with you. I still don't understand what the e-Naira is.
I confessed that to Rotis this morning as well.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, but this mobile phone business, this mobile phone banking system is actually the way to go. And if the banks will fully come on stream and partner with the telcos, Nigeria will be the happier for it long term.
So I'd like to chip in a bit on that point. At the moment, so obviously with the regulatory and the license regimes that were offered to some of the telcos can actually push a lot of the services independent of the banks. But obviously at some point you will have to see some, obviously synergy. At the moment, what you have is you have to see some synergy because a lot of the money is still sitting in the individual banks. You have to see that synergy. What has happened is that obviously with the delay of the mobile money and Momo products from the telcos, and that had to do with the licensing schemes, the banks basically took as an opportunity to push out most of their collection agents around the parts of the country. What it did for them was allow them to manage our court costs because they didn't have to open up branches. But unfortunately, what we got to see was, instead of moving to the point where people were moving more cashless, was that most of the transactions these guys were doing in the varied parts of the country that they were likely doing cash outs. So you would see people sending cash from maybe Lagos, the guy was working in the labor as in Lagos, he would get his daily cash, send 3K back to his village somewhere. Somebody would go and get cash out of that system and give somebody else. So I remember I was talking to my dad 2 weeks ago. I'd sent him, for the last 2 weeks, I sent him 15,000 1 week, and he told me he was only able to get 10,000 Naira for his 15,000, which means he paid a charge of about 5,000. Last week it was better. I sent him another 15,000. He was able to get, I think, about 12,000. But that's it. So it has had an effect. The demand and supply thing, going to go and arrest the guys doing POS is not the solution at the moment, or will not sort it out long term. There needs to be a balance between the supply and also now trying to push those other channels, like Mr. C has said, over a period of time, such that there's less pressure on cash and less need for cash to sort out transactions. I give a simple example. There's a girl that stays in my house. She does her hair every weekend for 500 Naira. She used to do her hair for 500 Naira. With this cash crunch, because we used to pay cash, the lady who is doing it is collecting 1,000 Naira because she tells me that she has to have cash to get cash. So, so those are things that we need to be careful about going, what, like Mr. C said, long term, like Rwanda, like Kenya, like Ghana. What we need to push a lot more are those mobile money solutions where people can do with their mobile numbers, and also even the fintechs will push more solutions if they're incentivized to do that. But, you also have to reduce the transaction charges to make it make sense to the end user at the end of the day.
Okay, so final point from a political end. This is going to be the first election where the use of cash has been seriously threatened. And it will be interesting to see what plays out on Saturday, because it is clear that some of the politicians who had come up with some strategies before now have had to rethink and rework those strategies. So let's see how much of an influence cash will have on Saturday's election. And let's see how effective the federal government's determination to ensure that this election is free from the influences of cash-mongering politicians. So Saturday's D-Day, we look out to see how effective this policy has been.
Awesome. So let's move on to the next story. And this one comes from Premium Times. The Nigeria Immigration Service has pledged support towards fast-tracking visa processing. And this is for international observers who are accredited and willing to monitor the general elections. Now, the Comptroller General of Immigration, Issa Idris, had sent out a memo ordering that all parties quickly process pending visa applications, noting that the presence and participation of these accredited international observers have become an established norm in the election exercises here in Nigeria.
So this obviously is an election story, but what comes to mind when I read through this is basically an announcement by the Comptroller General one of my challenges with this is that, and I'll take a step back. And recently, as you know, I'd had to go to an Eastern African country. That was some weeks ago. I got my visa in less than 4 hours. All I needed to do was go to a website, put in my details, what I was going to go and do there, get a letter of identification from whoever was down there, put in those details, and voila. I was about 2 hours later or an hour later, I got an email saying, hey, this is your e-visa. I didn't need to do any printout. I didn't need to take any physical copy. I didn't need to go and beg anybody. I took that e-visa. I've gone through 2 airports, got to my location, destination, and I'm here. I repeated the same thing when I wanted to get a tax card because I'm here for a while and I needed to, they need to pay taxes on whatever they're paying me. And I went through that process. Now, what does that tell me? It tells me that we are quite behind a lot of our African countries. I'm not talking about the European countries, the African countries. If we look at what we are trying to do, the election monitoring is not a new process. It's not something that's out of the ordinary. We know who wants to come in. They have specific credentials, belong to particular organizations, are sponsored by particular individuals, organizations. What we need to do a bit better is use technology to achieve these goals. If you have a platform, like what I had to use when I got here, and these guys were able to put those details on the web, on this platform, you're able to read whatever documentation they needed to have. Would not need this to come in out as a point of a news item. This would not need to be a news item. They would either be given or denied, and they'll be in and out of this place. And it's not just speaking to this election, this particular scenario, speaking to how we deal with a lot of our processes. A lot of our processes are built in with various stop or checkpoints that allow for manual intervention. And obviously, when it allows for manual intervention at those points, it reduces the value of automation because it now allows individuals to actually manipulate those processes or deal with those processes the way we want to do, and eventually corruption. So what we need are more efficient processes. Obviously, the government has a right to allow or not allow people who coming in. And this can be done either way. You do not need somebody stamping pieces of papers or looking through physical documents to do that. All these documents, the passport pages, everything required can go into an online portal or whatever, and they can do whatever they need to do. This shouldn't even be a news point of news. But unfortunately, in 2023, we're still discussing items like this. So that's all I would say. We can do much better as a nation.
All right, let's look at some messages coming through. And this one is from Jane. Jane says, I understand the need for cashless society. However, shouldn't all platforms be working first? This, and she's included a receipt of a 30,000 Naira transaction. She says, this transaction shows decline, but money left the account and it's been pending for another 3 weeks. What should we do in cases like this? Wale, right, trying to pull up Wale's message. Wale says, Nigerians are gradually keying into the cashless policy. I bought 600 Naira worth of fresh peppers and tomatoes, and I paid the seller via e-transfer. And Tunji says, going cashless and digital is tech-driven. The problem we face is the CBN and commercial banks insist on being in control. And Sunday has a message coming through. Are the dollars outside the Federal Reserve banks not more than what is in the reserve? Ditto for the euros and probably the pounds. What are those jurisdictions doing to have effective monetary policies that we cannot do? And we keep talking about money outside the banking system. Another message coming through. This is from Bola. Bola says the question is, how much is the Naira exchanging for? Let's go on a quick break. We'll continue the conversation. You can, of course, keep your messages coming. 0809 444 0981. This is Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1.
First Bank. You first bank.
This is Smooth Breakfast.
In every state, in every city, every town, village, and community, fast money agents are making all the difference, making things easier for all, making extra cash as a reward. You too can be a fast money agent, putting smiles on faces, and extra cash in your pocket too. When you're diet and you won't buy, you save money, take money, make money. Don't bring the yours, come here, promote, fast money agents. anytime you want buy. Save money, take money, lay money. Them don't break the US on your demand. The first money agents can be.
To register as a First Money agent, visit the First Bank branch closest to you. First Money, close and simple. You first. First Bank. Start your day the smooth breakfast way. Always fresh. Weekday mornings on Smooth 98.1.
You're listening to Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. It's Zibby here and my analyst this morning, Mr. C and Chibuzor. You can catch the live stream on YouTube, post a comment on there as well, or send us a message via WhatsApp 0809 444 981. And let's go on to Punch. Now, the Association of Senior Staff of Banks, Insurance and Financial Institutions has announced that banks should begin operations from Monday today. Now, the association disclosed this while suspending its plans to commence a strike action today. Now, there had been cases of bank facilities being attacked and destroyed across the country due to this Naira scarcity.
Okay, so thank you, Zibby. Very quickly. So in the past 2 weeks, certain banks have been attacked in certain states and some of their property and equipment were destroyed. So the Association of Senior Staff of Banks, Insurance and Financial Institutions took a decision to go on strike, but they've reviewed that decision and they decided not to go on strike. But they've advised their members if they're under threat of attack, they should shut down operations immediately, even if they have not received instructions from their employers. Now, ostensibly, this directive is to preserve their lives, first of all, before even the bank equipment. Now, having said that, I noticed that some of the banks have now gotten security personnel deployed to their premises. So in some bank premises, you will see vehicles belonging neither to the police or to the military parked in front. And that is to deter some people. It may not deter everyone. But the bigger thing is, no matter how frustrated we are, no matter how painful this whole situation is, we must remember something. The people destroying public property, if they're so aggrieved and so frustrated, why are they not destroying their personal property? Why are they destroying someone else's property? And two, everything will pass. This period will pass. We just need to hold on because, like it or not, tough times are coming. Even tougher times are coming. So we need to be able to endure a bit more. That's why I like the average Nigerian. The average Nigerian is tenacious. He can hang on. He's resilient. And we need to continue to exhibit that resiliency. So if the banks do not open or there's limited cash, do not go on a rampage of destruction. It doesn't help anyone because when a property is destroyed, it has to be replaced. And the money to replace is not going to fall from the heavens.
All right, let's look at a few messages coming through. Abbas says, what will play out on Saturday may likely be voter apathy because cash during the election is not just to buy votes. Parties need logistics and even the people need to move to their places of registration. So let's see how this will not be affected. And another message coming through from Remy. Remy says, the election will be unfair because people will vote against certain parties due to the current situation. And this is why perhaps other parties are supporting this policy. Ajayi says, nobody is against Nigeria moving with the trend in global practices, but why on earth must the citizens be subjected to untold hardship in order to implement these policies? Any policy that is meant to improve the lives of the masses must not be implemented at the detriment of the people. James from Ikeja. All right, Jane from Ikeja, this is a very long message. Let's try to keep the messages short. And James says, Nigerians are reeling under the weight of what is obviously a badly implemented policy. Nigerians embraced the POS machines when they were first introduced. And dearth of functional infrastructure to ensure a smooth operation of the policy. And that is from James. Let's move on to our next story. Please keep the messages coming. The WhatsApp number is 0809 444 981. In line with the order of the Supreme Court, Kaduna State Government has directed its ministries, departments, and agencies to ensure continued acceptance of payments in old and new Naira denominations. The state government also warned against breakdown of law and order on account of ongoing Naira shortage, warning that any form of protest is prohibited.
So this story has various angles. I'm still curious about the legitimacy of how the Supreme Court declaration is pending on or binding on the CBN and the federal government, given that obviously CBN has clear powers to do whatever they've embarked on, to be able to manage monetary policy and able to issue new currency and also withdraw currency. So that's one thing that I still hold open, and maybe Mr. C can give some insight at some point. The other thing, obviously, is it's a very interesting scenario, obviously, given that we're a federal system. The governor has come out within, that's another thing. I don't know if he's exceeded his powers or that's within his powers to make the declarations he's made. For the casual outsider in Nigeria or bystander in Nigeria, a lot of the statements by the governor would be seen to be putting him in direct opposition to what the president has declared. And for some people might be borderline, what's the word now? Yeah, so might be borderline treasonous for some people, but that's an impression. What for me is important is what the law is saying about this. So the law governor has basically asked that within his state that amounts of that the other currency, the 1,000 Naira and 5,000 Naira notes should still be collected for payments and things like that, cash payments and other things, that they are still legal tender as far as is concerned, based on the fact that Supreme Court has said that has passed this judgment the previous week. Now, how this is managed going forward is another issue. Obviously, the lawmaker who is making this, who's making the statement, has pointed out the fact that the governor has not been the best when it comes to following laws, and it's this just court orders, and this is the classic case of what you've done before is coming to bite you now. I wanted to use a 3-letter word, but I'll skip that. But it's coming to bite him now because yes, he's had a reputation of only following orders that appeal to him, and in some cases just abusing them completely or just not paying any attention to them. We need to get to the point where the law is, obviously we need to keep testing our laws, and we need to keep understanding where these laws take us to, and that forms the basis of where we need to grow, how we grow as a nation. And we need to get to the point where we're able to restrict government officials like governors and senators, wherever they are, from picking and choosing what they want to do and how they want to obey court orders. That's for me. So while a lot of people complain about, hey, this is treasonous or not treasonous or whatever the basis of legality is, for me, I think it's just a step in the right direction for us to test where our laws take us to, and eventually get to the point where there is a clear understanding of particular parts of law that we need to, as a people, that we need to take. Also, I find it a bit funny that in such a progressive state as Kaduna, in quotes, and I'm using my air fingers in quotes, the state is still collecting cash payments for services which is a problem for me, because it speaks to how we've basically managed this entire policy, the cashless policy, because a policy means various different, you are basically merging different processes together in one specific direction, just to simplify it. But when you look at the federal government who says they're pushing a cashless society, if you go down to Yaba, I want to board a train to Abeokuta or Ibadan, you have to pay cash. You have to be physically present at the point where the train is about to depart. You have to go there and pay cash. So it's problematic for me that on one side, the CBN is pushing a policy and the federal government is aping that policy. But you look at various MDAs and various government offices, and nobody's aligned in that policy. The federal government needs to set the example before asking the rest of Nigerians to bend over to follow that example. We need to get to the point where no federal government parastatal is collecting any cash for any government transaction. Once we get to that point, you now start pushing it down to the people. It becomes a way of life. It's not just about declaring it and throwing spanners and making things, want to happen overnight. there are clear thought processes to do these things, and there are clear-cut ways to do these things. So that's one other thing I like to pass on. The government needs to go back, look at its house, and say, you know what, we need to be fully aligned and fully on course with whatever policy we are pushing out. It's not for us to pick and choose how we want to implement this.
I've got a tweet from Christopher, and he says, funny how security agencies have not called in the governor for interrogation. How does a governor openly tell citizens to disregard a presidential directive and nothing gets said about it? It's an affront on the presidency as an institution.
The people need to understand that. Sorry, people need to understand
that
people need to understand we're in a federal structure. It's not about the security agencies swooping in. There is a way and a process to do this. The governor can be at complete odds with what the president is saying. It's allowed within the federal system. It's for them to go through the legal structure to be able to do that. And yes, the governor does have immunity. So there are limitations to what the president can do to him at the moment.
Do you want to add something, Mr. C?
Okay, so very quickly, yes, I agree that we're in a federal structure and each governor can express divergent opinions or positions from that expressed by the president. However, we must put everything in context. Even this Supreme Court suit sitting from a legal position, I'm not sure it will succeed because you are challenging a policy and its effectiveness. How do you do that behind the back of the author of the policy? The author of that policy is the central bank, not the federal government. So if you're going to determine the effectiveness of that policy, the central bank should be a party. And if the central bank should be a party, then you should not be at the Supreme Court. So that Supreme Court proceedings, I'm not sure what they really intended to achieve with it, apart from buying time, which they're certainly not going to get. But above this, if the president makes a statement you do not agree with, it's not for you to give a contrary directive as reported. The same way you proceeded to court to challenge the initial policy, you can ask the court to interpret the president's statement against the backdrop of the constitutional provisions and make a declaration. So I'm not sure what that policy is supposed to achieve. And a bigger question is, the banks in Kaduna State, will they be compelled to deal with the 500 Naira and 1,000 Naira banknotes? And if they will, under what law will they be compelled to do so?
Ajayi says okay, do you want to add something, Chibuzor?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. C. You've cleared out, I didn't want to speak out of turn because obviously my background is not law, it's not legal. I'm not a lawyer. And so I agree with you on most of the things because that's the way I've thought about this entire thing to start with. I still question why the Supreme Court even passed that ruling in the first place, given that they knew, and I'm sure the learned gentlemen, they knew that they have no jurisdiction over that matter, that the entity that was responsible for that declaration was the CBN. But it's what it is given our current state in Nigeria. What I'm a bit wary of is individuals and citizens on the streets and on the road misunderstanding what is happening here. Yes, the governor, they put the banks and financial institutions and any other entity working in that state in a very tight corner because they are still bound. The banks are licensed by the CBN. So whatever the governor declares, they have to answer to the CBN. But the governor is basically trying to put them in a tight situation by saying, I'm going to shut you down. I'm going to do all this to you. So it's also about testing the legality of what he's trying to do within the state at the end of the day. And that's what I want Nigerians to think about, that we're in a position where we're going to have to ask ourselves questions and have to test our legal standing on a lot of these issues.
All right, that's all the time that we have this morning for Freshly Pressed. Thank you so much for your messages. Thank you for listening. And thank you to my analysts, Mr. C and Chibuzor as well.
You're welcome.
Do stay with us.
Thank you. Bye.
On the Smooth Breakfast.
First Bank.
Take care, guys. Bye.
Bye, Chibuzor.